Anyways, we're going to go ahead and get on to the next story. So, the next story I found when I was looking up murderous ghosts. And I had talked about that before. I was trying to find stories about people who had been murdered by ghosts or supernatural creatures in general. And I found one of the most compelling articles I've read in a long time. And I remember when I finished it, I thought, I'm so glad I'm doing this podcast. Because just a month ago, if I had found this article, I would have maybe read the first couple of paragraphs and then skipped it. Because my time was so important even though I did nothing with it. But now that I'm kind of forced, I guess compelled is a better thing, to read these articles and find stories, I read it and I'm like, this was a fascinating article. It covered a lot of amazing things. So what happened? The narrative hook is at the very beginning of this article, and this is all true, this is all historical, is that a man killed a ghost. He's on trial for killing a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost. So this guy shot like a laborer who was wearing all white walking down the street. And a man jumped out of the alleyway and shot the laborer, killed him. Because he shot him because he was a ghost. So you're thinking, well, why would a guy jump out and the article gets you hooked right from there. You're like, why would a guy jump out and shoot at a ghost? So what happened was, back in the 19th century in Britain, they had a major problem with ghosts. What it was, so back then, if you were poor, they really wouldn't put you in a coffin. They'd bury you. But you were poor, they would wrap you up in the bedsheet that you died in if you died in bed, or they would just grab a bedsheet if you were dead somewhere else. They'd tie the feet and the head, and they'd throw you into the ground and bury you. So most bodies were covered in white sheets. Now that is why ghosts traditionally are just a white sheet. I had never known that. I had wondered that before. Why do ghosts appear in traditional media as just being a white sheet walking around? So right away, I'm like, this article's fascinating. But the problem they had in the 19th century was people dressing up as ghosts and jumping out at people it started off as a practical joke. Then people started putting a white sheet on and mugging other people. Give me your wallet. Give me your pences or whatever. Give me your shillings. And it would scare people so badly because they actually thought these were zombies. They thought these were ghosts. They thought this was the dead popping up out of nowhere and attacking people. And then people started wearing the sheets and raping women. Now, I'm sure halfway through the rape they realized it wasn't a ghost, but that's not the point. The point is the initial attack would shock you because you honestly thought it was a ghost attacking. And what made it worse was that all around Britain, people would say, there's a ghost in the area. There's a ghost, because you would see, first, like I said, it was a practical joke. People would stand in the graveyard in a white sheet and freak people out. And so when you were walking down a dark alley and a guy jumped out in a white sheet, your first inclination is going to be, that's the living dead. Because you've already heard all the stories about that. And it got to the point where so many women were being harassed by ghosts, who people thought were ghosts, that they began forming vigilante teams. And they would walk through the cities looking for ghosts. So there was that clown scare in America not too long ago. This would be the equivalent of that. But when we see people in clown outfits, we're like, oh, they're just ghosts. I mean, they're just people dressed up as clowns. These people honestly thought these guys were ghosts. So this one guy, he wore all white because he was a laborer. That was the clothes that he wore. And other people in town were saying, hey, you shouldn't be out at night. You kind of look like a ghost. And he's like, I don't care. What are they going to do to me? I'm not a ghost. I'll beat him over the head with my billy club or whatever I have, a hammer. But one day he was walking on the street and I believe it was at his sister's house. And she's like, please don't go out, or at least change your clothes before you go home because you look like a ghost. And he's like, whatever. He's walking on the street. Another guy who was part of one of these vigilante groups looking for ghosts saw a man in all white, thought it was a ghost, pulled the trigger, and immediately realized that he was wrong. Shot a man and killed him. He was arrested, charged, and found guilty for killing a ghost, for killing this man. Within 45 minutes, he's convicted of manslaughter. And this is how crazy things were back then with the trial system. He gets tried for manslaughter. The 3 judges say, no, that's not good enough. You can't split it down the middle. He's either guilty of murder or he's totally innocent. And you have to figure it out. And then the jury goes, well, I guess he's guilty to murder. Then he was sentenced to hang next Monday. None of this 10, 20-year thing. He was sentenced to hang next Monday. Now, luckily, the king got involved and said, you know what? No, we're going to delay his execution. And then eventually they said, just parole him. Like, it was a tragic mistake. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. And that kind of quelled down the fake ghost scare of that time because nobody wanted to get shot. And it was the same thing. You may have heard the legend of Spring Heel Jack, who apparently was a supernatural creature who leapt around London and was harassing women. Well, he was sexually assaulting women is what he was doing. And so people used the paranormal to cover for their activities. Dress up as a ghost, pinch a woman's butt, dress up as a ghost, drag a woman into an alley. Your Spring Heel Jack, you're attacking women. It was driving people insane. Plus, they had the superstitions that these things were real. So I know you'd like to think, well, we've advanced, we've changed, we've evolved, but people still use this ploy, and unfortunately, it still works. This just happened this year, by the way. So there was this young 15-year-old girl who was super petrified of the paranormal, of the occult, of the supernatural. She would never listen to the show. She would never watch X-Files, anything like that. She's totally terrified of that. She starts hearing noises in her house late at night, and she's petrified. She can't figure out what it is. She thinks a ghost is coming after her. Then one night, a little note gets passed underneath her door. Gets up, she reads it. It has very clear instructions. If you want me to stop haunting you, have sex with Liam Clark. Now, I don't know if it actually said that, but that was the intent, because Liam Clark was a 35-year-old neighbor, or he wasn't a relative, but he knew the family. And she kept getting these notes saying, if you want me to stop haunting you, you have to have sex with Liam Clark. And she didn't want to have sex with him. She's 15, he's 35. But she wanted the haunting to stop so badly. So what does she do? She has sex with him. And of course, this happens in Britain too. Maybe it's a weird thing over there. Now, of course, eventually he's arrested because she tells somebody. This guy who pretended to be a ghost is now in prison for 26 years. He put this girl through psychological and physical torture, pretended to be a ghost, preyed on her worst fears, and really that is what they did back in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. It was the same gimmick. Prey on their fears, make them vulnerable, attack them. So maybe societies don't change. I don't know. It was just kind of a weird side note, a weird kind of, I don't want to say end cap to this story, because I'm sure it's going to continue on. Whenever someone can figure out someone's weakness like this, they're going to keep doing it. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.